It is very cold. It's California cold.
This is winter, man. It's the first time we've had winter in years.
You know what it is, Rita? We live in old houses and nobody has insulation. So people think we're all warmed up here in California, but you and I are like, it's freezing for us because it costs too much to turn on the heat.
Yeah. I mean, what year is your house?
45.
Yeah, mine's 1929. I mean, it's great during the summertime, like downstairs because, thick adobe, but...
You're nice and cool. Well, welcome to Rock and Roll Confessional. We're confessing we are freezing.
Very much like, how did you say earlier? California
pussy.
Yeah, that's us. We can't stand the cold.
I cannot go anywhere east until the spring or the summer hits.
Yeah. I just need to go outside because the sun is shining today.
Yeah.
So just go out and thaw out for a while.
Get some vitamin D at least in us, right?
Indeed.
Well.
We've got another episode of Rock and Roll Confessional. This episode is with David Leaf. David has had an extensive career producing films like The Night James Brown Saved Boston, The U.S. versus John Lennon, and Beautiful Dreamer, Brian Wilson, and The Story is Smile. David has also written many books, including Kiss, Behind the Mask,
The BeeGees, The Authorized Biography, and his latest book, which he is discussing in today's episode, God Only Knows, the story of Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys, and the California Myth. David originally released this book back in the 70s, but has since updated it where he left off with over double the content.
And it's such a good book, and good interview, too. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, we start the interview in mid-conversation talking about some upcoming and past concerts. So let's just do it. Here we go with our interview with David Leaf. Is it really your actual classroom?
It is. It used to be called the Popper Theater. And 3+ years ago, there was a ceremony that Herb Alpert came to rename it. And he was with his wife, Lanny Hall, and they had a banner over the name of the new hall. And he made a speech, and then they pulled down the banner, and it said Lanny Hall, which is great.
Yeah.
If you have a clue who Lanny Hall is.
I know who Herb Alpert is.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's the Herb Alpert School of Music. So but what's so weird is for the students, it should be called Lanny Hall.
Right.
Like something out of Animal House, because it's not Lanny. It's not named after Lanny. It's named after Lanny Hall. Anyway, that is where I teach.
Did you go to the show last Saturday night at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion with Peter Frampton and Herb Alpert? And
I sure didn't. I'm still in a COVID bubble. Yeah, my fiance's mother is 89, and that's our little group.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had tickets to see McCartney, and I didn't go.
Yeah.
First time he's been on tour in LA that I didn't go to see his show. I was just terrible.
I didn't go to the show either because it was just like, I'm done with stadium shows, except for Bruce upcoming in summertime over in Europe. But
so much for done with stadium shows, Rita.
Well, no, after Europe.
Yeah, I'm going to fly 7,000 miles to the stadium show, but I'm done with them.
Yeah,
but that's the bucket list. That was on the bucket list, so I had to do that. And we were just talking about the rumor is Fort Springsteen probably going to do Desert Trip 2 out at Coachella, maybe. That was the one. Yeah. So it's like, that'll be first Springsteen show I've missed in LA area.
First time I saw him here was at Santa Monica Civic.
Oh,
wow.
God. Yeah.
And I slept out. This is how dumb my friend at the time, we were fanatics. And we wanted to make sure we got great seats. So we slept out all Labor Day weekend. There were only 6 of us. And we would take turns going to get something to eat. Anyway, we bought tickets. And then the night of the show, there were 2 shows actually. What had happened apparently, who knows, maybe this was an early instance of somebody holding back tickets or not, but supposedly he didn't need that much stage to get to where our seats were. And so they added an entire section, like 15 rows in front of us. And when we bought tickets, we got second row. And I'm like, wait a second, I'm 4th at the box office. Why am I getting second? Anyway, So when he went into the crowd, he was playing to those people in the first. And if you walked up the night of the show to get tickets, those were the seats they sold you.
Wow.
Oh, it was very, very painful.
Oh, I hate stories like that.
Welcome to the concert business.
Oh, God.
I love stories like that of a fan who's willing to sleep outside for days to get tickets.
I did that there. I did that at the Roxy.
Oh, which 78 or 75?
The 78. Yeah, I wasn't cool enough to go in 75. Well, I lived in New York in 75.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But, it's funny when I was in college, I was the music editor of my school paper. I guess this isn't the confession I'll make on the air, but you got free albums. So I get the first Springsteen album with here's the new Dylan. And I remember I put it on the turntable, put the needle on, I listened for 30 seconds, and I said, yep, he's the new Dylan. He can't sing either. And I took the needle off. And the next year, in 74, I was a mad taper of radio. And in New York, we had NEW, FM, which was my first job out of college.
Oh, wow.
And WPLJ.
Right, when they were rock.
Your old sister station.
Yep.
When they rocked.
And there was just an amazing amount of concerts. And I remember taping a Bruce Springsteen show from 74. And I wasn't sure why I taped it or why I even kept the tape. But when I moved out here, it was like the thing I listened to all the time.
Mm.
And so when Born to Run came out, I was ready.
That's very cool. Should we start officially?
Yeah.
Well, those are good stories that you had before there, though.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is such a pleasure to have you on Rock and Roll Confessional. David Leaf, and the book is God Only Knows, the story of Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys, and the California Myth. This is such a wonderful book. I haven't finished it completely, to be honest with you, but because I'm the type of reader, once I get in and it's like, oh my God, I got to listen to that. Oh my God, I got to stop and listen to that. So it takes me forever to read, but it's going to be one of those books that I do go back and finish. For me, I'll be honest, it was, if I could make this analogy, the Beach Boys weren't like at the top of my list. I was more like that Beatles Stones thing. And I was living back east.
I was too.
Okay. Yeah. And then so when I came out to California, it was like the California Myth. That was all just a bunch of BS. But, this book made me hear the music differently, because I think before my whole entire life, I listened to the Beach Boys in mono. And this time it was like, oh, let me go listen to this. And it was like listening in stereo. It was like things that I never heard before, things that it was really, really very ear opening and eye opening also.
Thank you. That's the best compliment, that somebody who thinks of the Beach Boys, or doesn't even think about them all that much, reads the book and understands who Brian Wilson is, because that was, the main goal of the first edition of the book.
Yeah, now this came out originally in 78, and then I guess a re-release in 85. But tell us what is different about this book that is out now, because this is like not just an addendum. This is like a whole other book. I mean, it's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, it is two books in one, because the original book had been out of print for so long, and so many people were coming to me asking me for copies, that it was like, okay, we have to include the original book. But then there's the people who have the original book. And so I said to the editor-in-chief of Omnibus, I said, this update needs to speak to them. It needs to give them a reason to buy the book. And so the update is actually more than half the length of the original book. Wow. So once I got started, it's clearly a subject that I'm not just passionate about, but it's kind of my mission in life, if you
kind of manifested this the way that it began. You were living back east. You made it your journey, your destiny to go to California, write a book about Brian Wilson. I love that. Can you tell us about those days and getting there?
Well, it's an almost unbelievable story. If I hadn't lived it, I don't know that I would accept it as truth. But when I was in college at George Washington University in 71, it was during the Nixon administration. It was during the anti-war movement. I used to sort of joke we got tear gassed whether we wanted to or not, and so there was a lot of anger at the establishment. And when I read about Brian Wilson for the first time in Rolling Stone in the fall of '71, for some reason that became a channel for my anger because it was all this beautiful, harmonious music, and yet the truth behind the story was dreadful. Really, from abuse as a child to this long lost Smile album, which at that point had only been lost for 4 years. It would be another, century before it finally saw reality. But I made it. My roommate and I became obsessed. The way we become obsessed about artists. Springsteen, the Beatles were my first and greatest love. I mean, I can't. Your first love is always your biggest one in music, I think. But at any rate, my roommate and I talked, and I said something is wrong. And he says, "Well, why don't you move to California and do something about it?" And so I kind of formed in my head this notion: I'm going to move to California, write a book about Brian, become his friend, and help him finish Smile. That was the crazy notion, as if I was the high school class president, and I said to everybody, "I'm going to be president of the United States someday." That's how absurd a notion it was.
And like you had any connection to do any of that?
I had no connection
and no background.
No family or relatives out here to live with,
I had relatives out here who were very nice and welcoming, but he was a lawyer and she was a dean at UCLA. So there was no connection to the music business. Even though I had friends in the music business back east, I didn't understand anything about it. So, for example, I had one friend who used to take me to the Bottom Line all the time. He was a booking person on television shows. So the record companies were courting him because they needed to get their artists on television. And we would go to the Bottom Line. We saw every. I mean, it was amazing. It could be Tom Waits one week and Barry Manilow the next. I mean, it was just it was that kind of world. And I remember asking him naively, why did two guys keep going into the bathroom at the same time? And he's like, "Shut up." And then I found out it had something to do with white powder.
Yeah. Okay.
But when I moved out here, I didn't know anything about the record business. I didn't know anything about music other than what I loved, what I was passionate about. And Brian's story just hit home with me in a way that it still does, half century later.
And the part about meeting Dennis, was that the first day that you had come to, or like first week?
I arrived here on a Saturday night. I was staying with a friend in Santa Monica. Monday morning, I went to the unemployment office in Santa Monica to transfer my claim from New York to LA, because $95 a week, you could pretty much live out here on that. I mean, it's hard to imagine. My first apartment was $145 a month. Anyway, so this is Monday morning. Here, 36 hours. I walk out of the unemployment office at the corner of Broadway and 5th Street in Santa Monica. Across the street going north, and walking towards me is Dennis Wilson.
Wow.
Now, I had no idea that their brother studio was at that corner. And I went up to Dennis and I said, I was never shy. Overconfident would be more like what I was. And I went up to him and I said, "Hi, Dennis, my name is David Leaf. I just moved to California to write a book about your brother, Brian." And he laughed. I mean, it was like the most absurd thing. And he says, "Good luck." And then he goes into the building. And about 3 years from that moment, the book was in store.
Wow.
That's amazing that you had this whole kind of idea, this plan of what you were going to do out here. And literally days after you get out here, you're already running into one of the Wilsons. Talk about synchronicity. That had to have been your additional green light to like, I'm moving forward. This is perfect.
Well, it gave a touch of reality to the notion that you could actually talk to somebody in the family, but it really didn't do much. And I had other dreams as well, as a screenwriter, as a sitcom writer, as somebody who could just go, get in the water and go body surfing in the South Bay. So I wanted to be where the sun was. I wanted to be where the ocean was. Brian was my good excuse to be here. And I met him about 7 months later. I was playing basketball or shooting baskets with a friend of mine from college at West Side Y on Sawtell. And onto the court walked two guys. One is Stan Love, the brother of the Beach Boys lead singer Mike, and the other is Brian Wilson. And it's just unbelievable. It's like, wait a second, I thought this guy's just in his bed all the time. He never goes out. How is it possible, A, that he's out, and B, that I'm playing 2-on-2 basketball with?
That's unbelievable because, the perception of Brian at that time was, like piano in a sandbox or staying in bed all day, Mr. Depressive. But, in your book, you talk about what a great athlete he was in high school.
Well, I didn't know any of this, of course. I knew, in my obsessive research in the time between when the Surf's Up album came out and I heard the songs Surf's Up Until I Die. And it was like, oh my God, he can still do it. He can still make that magic. I got to get out there and help. And Surf's Up, wow, this is as good as anything I've ever heard. I guess the smile myth is true. I want to hear the rest of it. But I didn't know anything about life. So when I met a friend of his from high school, a great guy named Rich Sloan, and he brought his high school yearbook to our lunch. And there's Brian as the center fielder for the baseball team and the quarterback of the football team.
Unbelievable.
And it goes a long way towards understanding everything about the Beach Boys. That Murray Wilson, who was enormously abusive of his sons, also instilled, especially in Brian, a competitive spirit, which I think might have been, right for the times as well. It was like, you're going to get out there and be something. You're going to be a big deal. He also instilled in Brian a sense of loyalty, which team sports is about. That loyalty came over with Brian to the Beach Boys, and I think was very damaging to him in the end. Above all things, you are loyal.
Do you think that if he didn't have that loyalty ingrained, that the Beach Boys would have split up or broken up or fallen apart earlier than they actually did?
Well, I believe that in 1967, when he shelved Smile, he did it to save the Beach Boys. It was out of loyalty to the Beach Boys. Now, there were all sorts of other problems at the time. Capitol Records wasn't supportive of the new direction that the Beach Boys that Brian was taking the Beach Boys, despite that Good Vibrations had just been a million-selling #1 single. And there was certainly drugs at the time. It's hard to know. There are no iPhone recordings of that era, so we don't really know what was going on. Brian, to your point earlier, as a depressive, well, if you're the crap beat out of you as a kid, you're depressed. I mean, you're going to be depressed. So Brian loved to make people laugh. That's the dichotomy. And Smile musically was supposed to be part of that. When you're laughing, when you're smiling, everything else evaporates. You don't worry about what's going on. And so that was his antidote to Pet Sounds, which was the preceding album, which is a depressing record. I mean, it's like his emotional autobiography, but it's a very sad album. Hang On to Your Ego. I Just Wasn't Made for These Times. Caroline, No. I mean, these are not joyous songs. They're brilliant. There's a reason everybody from Bob Dylan to Gustavo Dudamel talks about Brian Wilson as a great classical artist, not a pop artist, but somebody working in the pop world who had the abilities of a classical composer.
I loved the George Martin quote in the book, basically where he says the Beatles were more impacted by Brian Wilson than anybody else, and Elton John talking about, he's got an orchestra in his head.
Yeah, there's one of the reasons the book is called God Only Knows, besides it being named after one of Brian's most beloved compositions, is that very often the question the answer to a question might be God only knows. where did these gifts come from? How did they develop? Well, we can talk about what he listened to, and we can hear his evolution as an artist, but certain things like hearing an orchestra in your head, well, that's not something you can learn. And so George Martin, who he should have been the King of England, one of the greatest human beings I've ever met, just graceful and so gracious. And he helped me in a lot of projects. And when I interviewed him about Brian, he said, if I have to select one living genius of popular music, it's Brian Wilson. Now, this is the guy who spent 8 years in a studio with John Paul, George,
right,
and Ringo. And so it's like, you're picking Brian over those guys. Okay, that's an indication of how big a deal Brian Wilson was in that time.
And what was fascinating to me is that I think I knew, but I forgot that he was really almost deaf in one ear. So he never produced the early music in stereo, right? Everything was mono.
But he is deaf in one ear. He always produced in mono. And of course, the Beatles produced in mono. Most of their early albums. Certainly the early albums right up to Sgt. Pepper, because the technology was 2-track, 3-track, 4-track. So the mono mixes were what the Beatles were focused on early on, but Brian never heard stereo,
and probably still doesn't.
He does not. No, he he can turn his good ear to the speakers, but that's not hearing stereo.
No.
Do you think possibly some of the abuse caused that, or was he born with that? It's probably hard to know.
There are 3 different answers. He will talk, or he has spoken about having been hit in the head by a 2x4 by his father. Brian has also spoken about getting into a fight when he was like 6 or 7 years old with a neighbor, and the neighbor hit him with a lead pipe, and that caused the deafness.
Okay.
And then could have been from birth. So nobody really knows.
Yeah.
God
only knows.
Exactly.
Good tie-in, Rita.
So he managed to do what he did, and it's interesting when you ask him to compare himself to other musical artists. I always, referred to Brian as like the Beethoven of rock, because he had a scowl on his face in so many pictures. And then I saw Amadeus, which is, this guy's having a lot of fun, which also was Brian. So I started thinking of Brian as the Mozart of pop. But if you ask Brian, he says, no, the person I'm most like is Bach. And I think it's a relatively straightforward answer. I think in Brian's soul, he's writing church music.
Yeah.
Whatever the lyrics are, there's a depth to them. And I think that depth in part comes from the pain of his life. And that's why we feel it so strongly. And he did an album a couple of years ago called At My Piano, where it's just very tender piano versions of some of his most beloved songs. So if you walked into a church on Sunday and the church organist was playing Don't Worry Baby or In My Room or Surfer Girl or The Warmth of the Sun or so many of those compositions, you would say, oh, that's a nice new song by Bach. I like that. That's a nice hymn. And so if you stripped away the lyrics, that's what you're left with. And that's who Brian thinks of himself as.
In the book, you talk about, or that it's mentioned that Smile was a teenage symphony to God. That's what he wanted it to be. And so that plays into that whole spiritual aspect as well.
Rita, when I put those words in the original edition of the book, I was just quoting another interview. I didn't understand what it meant. Oh, a teenage symphony to God. Okay. That sounds like a glib one-liner from a press release. But as I got to know him and got to experience him both as a person and musically, I began to see that's his belief. He talks in interviews. He'll say things, and he's not the best interviewee in the world. He gives very short answers to your questions. But if you don't have to deconstruct him, because he says exactly
Mm-hmm.
Where did that song come from, Brian? Well, every once in a while, your soul wants to come out and play.
I love it.
I mean, how much more clear can you be? George Martin asked him about songwriting. He goes, well, I go through periods where, I'm not writing, and then I'll go to the piano, and it's if a higher power is guiding my fingers to the keys. So if Brian Wilson believes that he's a channel, who am I to disagree?
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that. Not at all. Not at all. You have such a deep appreciation and admiration and respect for Brian, and that comes from the heart. You can tell. I mean, that is genuine. That is sincere. I think the first time I ever met Brian was a Mark and Brian interview. I was running the board for them when Brian had come in, and a certain individual was lurking around, what we can get into, but I would look at him, during a break where he would just be silent, and I tried to start a conversation with him, and he was just not easy to talk to. But that's you understand about people and what they've gone through, and sometimes how people are who they are. So, there was another point where he was drinking a little ginseng bottle. That was like, I think Landy's big thing of like, you get these little ginseng bottles in Chinatown, and they're good for energy and stuff like that. And I was doing the same thing at the time. So it was like, oh, we have that in common. But he really didn't seem like a person. He seemed like a puppet in a sense.
Well, in the era you're referring to, he was the weird psychologist who had been given control of his life and saved his from my observation. But when those 9 years had passed and Brian was asked what it was like, he said it was as if I was in prison for 9 years. He was in prison. He could not make a call to anyone he wanted to without getting permission. He couldn't see his friends without permission. Landy's girlfriend would write lyrics for his songs, and then there would be a battle with Warner Brothers Records to get his lyrics off and get Brian's real lyrics on the songs. I mean, it was a terrible time for him personally, emotionally, and creatively. And yet, so if we talk about Landy as he's the head of Folsom Prison. I mean, he's the guy. He's the warden. However, we have to say he or someone like him hadn't been hired. Brian, from what I had seen in '82, was going to die. So we'll give him credit for that. We have to give him credit for something else. When Brian bought a car, Landy wanted Brian to have these real experiences as if he had them. So he took Brian into a car dealership in Los Angeles and bought a car. And Landy decided that Brian should go out with the woman who sold it. And that woman became Brian's second wife and was instrumental in getting rid of Landy.
I'm surprised Landy would have had him date somebody that could have come in and done exactly what happened.
He thought he could control everything.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a madman.
He was videotaping, right? Like everything Brian did?
There was videotape of everything. He once said in an interview, there's room for only one crazy person in Brian's head, and that's going to be me.
Oh, God.
But the other thing he did, which is, looking back on the last 35 years, if not for Landy, I don't think there would have been a solo career. Because with the Beach Boys organization the way it was, everyone else could make solo albums, but Brian couldn't. If Brian was going to work, it was going to be for the Beach Boys. Mm-hmm. And there are terrible stories about it. So Landy is the one who, I think primarily for ego and economic reasons, decided that when this solo offer came along, we're going to do this. And I don't care what the Beach Boys say. And it took someone that crazy to stand up to them. Brian on his own couldn't have done it.
And you were on the inside with Landy. I mean, he accepted you as what your role was at that time. So you were being invited into the studio to help with things and make decisions, were you not?
I wasn't making decisions in the studio, but I was what the KGB would have called a useful asset.
Okay, well, that's positive.
But when, for example, when I was writing the update for the 1985 edition of the book, I got I heard from Landy's lawyer warning me to be careful about what I wrote. The good news about writing this edition of the book, because there's a chapter called "The Battle for Brian Wilson."
Right.
You cannot libel somebody who's dead. So I could tell the truth as I saw it, as Russ Titleman saw it, as Lenny Waronker saw it, as Seymour Stein and everybody who was there saw it. It was insane. It was like there was a hissing snake behind you. That's what you saw, Rita. And you didn't know when he was going to strike.
Yeah, it was scary. And that's why, I said about the things that you're doing it out of love and deep appreciation. It's hard to become good friends with somebody like that, but you became a good friend, a trusted confidant. And it sounds like his second wife, was it Melinda?
Melinda, yes.
Yeah, the second wife, Melinda, was also very helpful with that transition in that process. And that's great, because he's a different type of person now. He likes to have fun. He makes jokes,
But he at heart, he's a teenager.
Yeah.
He didn't have to grow up. He didn't really have to take adult responsibilities other than the enormous responsibility of churning out 3 albums a year and 4 hit singles a year.
Yeah.
But there's a teenage heart there. There's a childlike quality to him that makes the music appealing to everybody who hears it. And when his prison sentence was over, and he and Melinda and my late wife and I, we would go out to dinner very frequently. It was like going out with teenagers. It was just fun. And that Brian, who you don't see. That's not a public Brian you see. And that's what I wanted to give the reader in the book, was a sense of what he's like when he's not in the public spotlight, and do it in a way where I'm not taking advantage of the access I have. But to do it in a way that is illuminating and celebratory. It's not like there haven't been extraordinarily difficult times in the last 35 years. He's a guy, who has to take medication. He's a guy who has overcome tremendous challenges. Did anybody think Brian Wilson was going to become a road warrior? Nobody. Did anybody think he was not going to finish Smile, but instead present it live for the first time? I mean, it's like, what are you smoking? I mean, it's just the things that happened were as unbelievable as me running into Dennis on the street or Brian in the Y. I mean, it was a cascading series of, I don't believe this has happened.
That the production in London of Smile, the first time he did it, Paul McCartney was in the crowd. It was like, oh my God, did Paul say hello to him before the show or after? I forget.
Well, truth be told, Sir Paul and Sir George came the fourth night. In the documentary, it's edited to include them because their presence is so significant to the story. But if he was, as a writer and as a filmmaker, we talk about a 3-act arc to a story. And when we started work on Beautiful Dreamer, Brian Wilson and the Story of Smile, we didn't know what the 3rd act was going to be. We knew about Brian's rise, we knew about his fall, but now he was going to tackle the biggest challenge of his career, of his life. And we didn't know. When he walked up the steps at Royal Festival Hall, I didn't know if he was going to turn around and walk back.
Yeah.
I mean, I had said to the cameraman I had following, I said, I want you right there because I think it's going to feel like Dead Man Walking. And there's a scene in the movie where, second day of vocal rehearsals, he drives himself to the hospital. He's so flipped out about what's going on. And so it was a roller coaster. His whole life's been a roller coaster. And the fact that we have this beautiful harmony-filled music is a testament to that inexplicable question of God only knows. He believes that his job in life was to make music that would make people.
That's an incredible stuff. I'm not sure how much more time you have, but we want to talk to you about a couple of other things.
As much time as you need.
Oh, because quite the fascinating life you've had. Another band that you were kind of close to, and I saw this documentary when it was out, was on the BeeGees. And it was like, that was really good. I remember the Bee Gees as a kid, like 1941 mining disaster and words. And it was like, man, those are great melodies, great songs. And then they kind of went into this disco phase and they got,
Well, nothing will make Barry Gibb's head explode more than using the word disco
sorry, Barry.
to refer. No, they thought of it as dance music. They thought of it as R&B dance music because it wasn't the thump, 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 thump of disco from the records they were making. So you remember when you were a kid and you played with dominoes and you would set up a whole long string of dominoes and you would knock them over. So my career has been those kind of dominoes. And then sometimes they go out like this and then they circle back. So after I turned in the manuscript for the first edition of the Beach Boys and the California Myth, RSO Records was looking for somebody to write the BeeGees authorized biography.
Mm-hmm.
And the same company that was doing my Beach Boys book was doing that. And they sent my manuscript over, and a guy named Jay Levy at RSO read it and goes, "This is the guy to write the BeeGees story." So that's my first collision with them. Lovely men, lovely family. I was a big fan, like you, of New York mining disaster. Right on. I remember hearing Nights on Broadway when it first came out, and thinking, oh my God, they're back! So happy. Yeah. I remember going. I don't know if you remember Michelle Meyer, who was one of the coolest people in LA. She booked the Starwood. She booked the
name.
The whiskey. I mean, she was really the doyen of the rock and roll scene in the 70s and 80s. I remember going with her to see a preview of this movie called Saturday Night Fever. We had no idea what it was. Nobody knew what it was going to become. How thrilling it was that the Bee Gees music was in it. It was just exciting that this band that I loved was back. Now, the first day I was in the studio with the Bee Gees, everybody is leaving for the day. Barry says to me, "I'm just going to record a lead vocal. You can stay and watch if you want." And it's like, yeah,
of course.
I think so. And so I'm sitting there in a darkened studio on couch in front of the mixing. And there's the glass, and behind the glass is Barry. He's lowered the lights in the studio, has his headphones on, and he's singing lead vocal on a song. And I'm thinking, is this as good as I think it is? Mm. I mean, I'd never heard it before. It was a song that turned out it was Too Much Heaven.
Mm.
Well, flash forward from that point in 78, almost 20 years later, I get a call from BeeGees land and Barry. Do you think you could get Brian to induct us into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? And I asked Brian, and he loves the Bee Gees that much that he says yes, because this is not a person who wants to purposely go out in front of a crowd.
Had he ever met them?
He had met them briefly at Criteria Studios in Florida, but didn't know them. He just loved their music.
Okay.
And so we go to Cleveland, where the induction ceremonies were that year. And the night before the show, Barry and Brian are in the hotel room together, because Barry is going over the song Too Much Heaven with Brian. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is unbelievable how this has come full circle. And the next night, Brian goes out and sings it. And when he hits the high note in the bridge, there's a voice at the table next to me that goes, "Oh my God, it's David Crosby."
Oh, wow. Oh my God.
Crosby, Stills and Nash were being inducted that year. And, Brian, this voice he had, this multi-octave voice, Harry Nilsson, Linda Ronstadt, a few others in pop music who could sing like that. And they all love what Brian could do. And now flash forward to 25 years later, and I send an email to Barry's guy. I said, "You think Barry could write an essay or an introduction for my book?" And Barry writes a beautiful essay that's in the new edition of the book. And it's you can tell when something's written by the person as opposed to they've handed it off to a publicist to write. No publicist would write what Barry wrote. I mean, it's just so beautiful. It's so sweet.
Yeah.
And there's something. They're the only surviving members of their brotherly clan. Yeah. They're the oldest brothers. The chief reason the groups were so successful. And there they are, just kind of alone.
And you also have a nice write-up by Paul McCartney. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard of him.
No, all of this comes from it's these dominoes coming back in circles. You meet people. I first met Paul on the telephone when I interviewed him for the Pet Sounds CD for the liner notes, and kept in touch with his people. A friend of mine worked for MPL McCartney's company for 20 years. So I was there with Brian on several occasions where we were hanging out with Paul, including, backstage at the Queen's Jubilee concert
Wow.
in 2002, where Brian did all sorts of things that are in the book that, nobody could have gotten away with except him. And there's a very special relationship to that, guys. And Rita, you talked about Paul being in the Beautiful Dreamer film. If you watch the scene where Paul comes backstage to talk to Brian, you see Brian takes his hand and he kisses it.
Yeah.
It's like the Pope kissing, a cardinal or something. I mean, there's something about their relationship that's unique. At the end of the show, Sir Paul and Sir George Martin are giving Smile a long standing ovation, and out of the corner of his eye, we're sitting to the right of Sir George, and we're watching him look at Paul, and he's eyeing Paul like with almost like, I wonder what he thinks, because Sir George knows what Pet Sounds meant to Paul.
Yeah.
And
the most important album of Paul's ever heard, probably.
Pretty much. I mean, what Sir George said was Sgt. Pepper was our attempt to equal Pet Sounds. So there's just this complete secular nature to the killer bees in my life, if you will. The Beach Boys, the Beatles, and the BeeGees.
Yeah, I just love that. The ending of the film, too, the documentary that you did, I couldn't help but notice that at the end of it, I was just smiling. And that's what it was about, smiling, smiling about the completion of a project and something that was so great that finally came to fruition. That's just beautiful.
Thank you. I tell the story of when Brian was getting this enormous standing ovation at the end of Smile, and he's not one who takes it easily. And he steps up to the microphone and it's like, hold it. And the crowd just gets louder. The British fans are insane about Brian. New York and London are his two biggest, ironically, the two biggest places where he's worshipped. And he steps back and he lets out a sigh. And I saw something, and I looked at my wife, and it was like, did you see what I saw? And we both independently had a joint hallucination, whatever it was. We saw demons flying out of his head.
Yeah.
And so when I was interviewing Brian for the movie, I said, Brian, did you feel like the demons had left you when you finished Smile? And he said, yes, I did. Now, Brian not only is not the greatest interviewee of all time, but sometimes he'll just parrot back to the question or what they've said. So I was very happy a year or two later to see another interview where he talked about Smile and the demons leaving him unprovoked by me, because it's hard to get to the truth. It really is hard to get to the truth. So in this update, I'm really I'm just trying to give the reader a sense of what it's like to be around him that you can't get from Wikipedia. You can't get it from watching interviews or seeing him in concert. What's it really like to be with him behind the scenes? And a friend of mine in England was reading the update, and he sent me an email. He said, I feel like I'm reading your diary. I said, is that good or bad? He said, I'll let you know when I get to the end.
It was great.
There's a part in the book, David, you talk about where you're interviewing Brian, and he finally kind of comes out with the Charles Manson connection.
That's an interview with Dennis.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. And I thought that was fascinating that I would think like you would be at that point of like, oh my God, finally now it's being talked about and you're finally getting this story from Dennis.
So the entire point of my writing, and at this point, I'm pretty sure I've written more words about Brian Wilson than anybody else alive. The was to shed light on his artistic journey.
Yeah.
So I really was not interested in the ex-wives, the backstage fights. I only wanted to talk about what affected his art. And Dennis, who next to Brian, I think was easily the most talented member of the group, and had Brian's gift. He had the ability to put feelings into music, very powerful. And I had spent the night at the studio observing him, and we went back to his house in Venice, and we're doing an all-night interview. And I wasn't going to ask him about Charles Manson. He brought it up. He said, I guess you want to know about Charles Manson.
Yeah.
And then he didn't reveal anything. So it was strange. So this is a perfect segue, Rita. You know, I understand you like to have a confession in the rock and roll confession. So Dennis was, I guess the expression would be snorting cocaine during the course of this interview. And he was frustrated that I kept saying no.
How can you say no?
I guess nobody said no to And then around 5 o'clock in the morning, he says, well, what about some girls?
And you said?
And I said, well, I'm not going to say no to that.
Okay.
So then he started calling his girl, whoever his regular girls that he would call her. And they were like, Dennis, I just went to sleep and nobody came over. So,
well, how do you snort girls anyway? Really?
No answer.
Okay.
I noticed hearing vocally bits of Brian in the studio with people like Carol Kay, Hal Blaine.
Yeah, Hal.
Just amazing session workers, and he didn't write music. I mean, but he spoke it to what they knew how to do. But to other people, I never heard him sound like his dad, or how I would envision his dad. He seemed to be very amenable, very affable with everybody in the studio who didn't understand what he was doing, but he never screamed and yelled at them.
Yes, that's correct. That was not Brian at all.
Yeah.
Brian is the sweetest person, doesn't have a mean bone in his body. That doesn't mean he doesn't get angry and frustrated with life. But when it came to his musicians, and I think his musicians are really his family. Those are the people he loves most. So the players who we first became aware of watching a Phil Spector session, then he brought them into his studio to play on the tracks in 65, 66, 67. Hal Blaine, Carol Kay, Don Randy, Tommy Tedesco, Glenn Campbell, a whole bunch of people who later Hal Blaine nicknamed the Wrecking Crew, but that's not what they were known as. These were the people who were playing, maybe they were playing 3 sessions a day, 6 days a week. And as Carol Kay said, there was something special and different about Brian. He was not coming in with typical pop or rock chords. They were jazz musicians, and he was coming in with jazz music and making it popular, and doing it with a sweetness that really was special. And when you listen to the session tapes, when I did the Pet Sound Sessions box set in 96 and interviewed all these people, they had nothing but nice things to say, not just, oh, he was a good guy, but he knew what he was doing, and they explained how he did it. And as you said, Rita, he didn't come in with fully written charts. He had his chord charts, and he knew what the melody was, but he heard in his head what he wanted each of them to play. And he was capable of picking up the instrument and showing. Wow. So with the exception of the horns, he didn't have a good lip. And so the horn players, he would have to, get the sound from them that he wanted, the notes that. But they're wonderful stories of the LA Philharmonic playing on one of his sessions, and him pushing. They played the notes perfectly on the first take, and he said, "No, you have to make it cry. It just has to sound like it's crying." And that was not what they were accustomed to. So he pushed them. He pushed all of his musicians to a place that no one else in popular music was pushing them. And they loved him for that because they heard the result. He wasn't just some lucky kid who wrote a couple of songs. And last year I did a book signing up in Ventura, and a woman in the line came up to me almost with tears in her eyes because her father, Lou McCreary, played on the Pet Sounds sessions. She wanted to tell Brian how much her dad loved him and how much he meant to all of them because of the way he was once nicknamed by his cousin the Stalin of the studio, which is a horrible piece of alliteration. But it was because he wanted it to be done perfectly. And he heard things. This same cousin said, "Well, you have dog ears." Well, no, he heard things that no one else heard, and that's why the music has survived generation after generation, and why anytime they do a list of the greatest albums of all time, Pet Sounds will be on it. If you were to ask Brian where he ranks Pet Sounds in comparison to Smile, he'll say, "Well, I'll give Pet Sounds a 7 and Smile a 10." And if I did this, I said, "Really?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, David, Smile's happy music. Pet Sounds is depressing." As if it's the most obvious thing in the world, which it is.
Yeah.
What I find really interesting is that he would go in and spend all this time with the musicians in the studio, and then in turn they would turn around and teach the band what to play.
No, he would teach when the Beach Boys would go out on tour. He would teach them. They would do simplified arrangements of what was on the record, like Good Vibrations. He actually, the first time they played Good Vibrations, he flew to where they were in Ann Arbor, Michigan, to teach them how to play Good Vibrations live. But what they were able to do for decades was they were able to sing those vocals live.
Yeah,
and that's what one heard. If you went to a Beach Boys concert, their harmonies were spectacular. Nobody sang like that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the Association and a few others, but in terms of a rock group singing "Help Me, Rhonda" or "I Get Around," I mean, they really nailed those vocals, and a lot of it had to do with Carl Wilson, who had the voice of an angel.
Nice.
Love it.
David, we're going to do what's called the bonus round.
Okay.
So now we're going to get serious with questions. All right. What was the first concert you went to?
First concert I went to was either the Fifth Dimension or the Beach Boys. I'm not sure.
Where was that at?
The
New York?
It was in New York. The Fifth Dimension was in upstate New York. The Beach Boys concert, I went with the guys on my bowling team at high school. Said, "Come on, let's go see the Beach Boys." And it was like, "Oh yeah." And we went up the night of the concert to the box office without tickets, and the ticket seller was apologetic that all of the cheaper seats that sold for $1.50 were sold out. So we'd have to take the $2 floor seats.
The days.
Yeah.
But in the Rock and Roll Confessional, the stupidest thing I ever did.
Sure.
Well, there's tied for a couple, but the girl, literally the girl next door, Robbie Singer, she went to see the Beatles at Shea.
Oh,
one of the most famous concerts in the history of. And I remember as a baseball fan thinking, why would you go to a baseball stadium to see a concert? Not understanding that the idea was to be in the room with these people you idolize, which was something I learned at that first Beach Boys concert when the Strawberry Alarm Clock did Incense and Peppermints and the Soul Survivors did Expressway to Your Heart. It was like, I get it now. You're in the room with the people doing their hit. And I get chills just thinking.
Yeah. You've done a lot of documentaries. I've got to check out the John Lennon.
It's great.
Yeah, I haven't seen
Thank
that
you.
one yet.
U.S. versus John Lennon.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
that's definitely on my list to do. But who else would you love to make a documentary film about?
Oh my God. How long a list do you want?
As long as you want. Go ahead.
Well, I'd start with Paul Simon, Paul McCartney, and Stevie Wonder.
Wow.
Because and Jimmy Webb.
Yeah.
I love great songwriting, and because to me, that's if you don't have a great song, nothing else matters.
Mm-hmm.
And so the stories of their lives, the story of how their songs fit into. I just finished a documentary on an old rock and roll Hall of Famer, Dion.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
But we're talking about the story of why didn't he get on the plane with Buddy Holly? How did he end up on the cover of Sgt. Pepper? And those are just
Yeah.
those are kind of side notes. This story of a guy who 50, nearly 60 years after making his first record, still has his chops, still tours, has had 2 #1 blues albums in a row in recent years. This guy lives and breathes music. Where did it come from? Well, you ask him the question, he goes, "Well, when I was 11 years old, I fell in love with Hank Williams. And
Wow.
I learned 50 Hank Williams songs. And growing up in the Bronx, my uncle would take me to these bars that were kind of like mafia bars. And I would put on a cowboy hat and I'd play Hank Williams songs. And he said one night, 2 guys stuck $20 bills in the guitar hole of his acoustic guitar. And he said, I had the rent. There's something to this music thing."
Yeah.
And here he is, 72 years later, still
Yeah.
doing it.
Still doing it. Yeah.
When does that come out, David?
Hopefully this year.
Oh, good.
Is that in theaters or is that on streaming?
It'll be streaming. There'll be a limited theatrical, but these kinds of films don't belong in theaters as much as I loved it when the U.S. versus John Lennon played in theaters. Seeing these on a big screen is very, very special. Same with The Night James Brown Saved Boston. We would have special screenings for them.
Sure.
But a Beautiful Dreamer, we showed it on a big screen, and it's wonderful. It's a whole different experience being in a room with a few hundred or 1,000 people watching a movie at the same time. As opposed to the streamers. But I just love telling the stories of the music that matters the most to me.
What is your coolest piece of rock and roll memorabilia?
Coolest piece of rock and roll memorabilia. I had a poster that from the U.S. versus John Lennon signed by Yoko to me.
Wow. You had?
Well,
where'd you sell it?
It was lost in a flood.
Oh.
My coolest piece of rock and roll memorabilia. I was never much of a collector. So my ticket stub collection to me is like, that's my coolest memorabilia because every one of those tickets has a concert attached to it.
Yeah, and has a memory attached to it.
Has a memory attached to it and a sound attached to it. I used to sneak in my tape recorder to concerts for years. And I also, another confession, I went to the Santa Monica Civic when Queen was playing. And I had no one to go with. And this concert wasn't sold out, so I could have gone up to the box office and bought a ticket. And I didn't go in. So that goes in the confession.
Don't you have a song that you recorded with Brian?
Yes. Okay. So thank you for
reminding me. Hasn't been released yet.
Yeah. So one day I get a call from Brian. He says, "I'm down in the studio. I want to record Mr. Tambourine Man. Can you come down? Print out the lyrics." And it's a long, the original lyrics.
Yeah.
It's a long lyric. So I print it out and I go down there. He says, "Okay, we're going to do this as a duet." And it's like, okay, I can carry a tune. I have no idea what he has in mind. He says, "You go out and record it first." And I said, "Which verses?" So we picked 3 verses. And he says, he hits the top. He says, "Okay, double it." And then, "Okay, come in here." And he does a quick mix and that's it. I said, "What about you?" He says, "No, I decided I just wanted to produce you singing Mr. Tambourine Man."
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool.
And he gave me a tape of that. So yeah, that you're correct. Thank you for, I don't think of that as memorabilia. I think of that as
Kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's
very cool.
it's like above memorabilia.
Have you transferred it to CD or digital to save it?
I have it on my laptop.
Oh,
So
good.
I can play it for friends and family should they want to hear it.
Definitely want to hear it.
It when Brian does a box set, career retrospective, of unreleased stuff, that's where I hope it'll end up.
It'll be like the bonus material.
On the it's a bonus. It's a
bonus disc.
Well, maybe if you buy it, you'll get a secret code to listen to it,
to download it.
But you hear his production style. You just don't get why I'm singing it.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Very cool. So, are you still teaching at UCLA?
I'm teaching UCLA. I'm teaching this quarter. I teach a course called Docs That Rock, Docs That Matter, which is about music documentaries from the Rocky era. So I'm teaching history of the Rocky era through music documentaries. And pretty much every week I get a director to come in and talk about their films. So it's like that old TV show Inside the Actor's Studio.
Yeah. That's great. Awesome. Which I wish you would have been one of my teachers, man.
Really?
I wish
chemistry or something like that.
I wish I had been one of my own teachers. Of course, I was cutting class. Oh, that goes in the confessional also.
Yeah. You're bad.
So I teach that. Then in the spring, I teach a course called The Real Beatles, spelled REL.
Okay, so it's not Pete Best.
well, if Pete would come to class. So I actually get people who have worked with the Beatles or one of the Fabs to come to class.
Jeez.
So we've had Peter Asher, Michael Lindsay Hogg, and all sorts. Bill Harry, the guy who was the editor and publisher of Mersey Beat, way back when, telling stories like being in the room the day that Stu Sutcliffe and John Lennon met for the first time.
Very cool.
We had as a guest a guy who shot the only footage that was ever done at the Cavern Club, and the story is so amazing. It takes an hour to tell.
Yeah.
It's just remarkable. People who worked with Brian Epstein. I mean, Peter Asher. And then people who've worked with the Beatles or the Beatles organization as well.
That's cool.
On the anthology, the great historian Mark Lewison has been a guest. And then I have another course called Songwriters on Songwriting, in which great songwriters come to class and tell the story of their life through their songs. And the first year I taught the class, week 1 was Mike Stoller. Week 2 was Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil. Week 3 was Jimmy Webb. Week 4 was Lamont Dozier. Week 5 was Mac Davis. I've had Randy Newman, Burt Bacharach. I mean, it's amazing, as well as contemporary writers too. But there's just nothing to me more exciting than hearing somebody explaining where they got the idea to write a song, showing it at the piano, and then playing it. I mean, there's a guy Mike Posner, who came I think 3 or 4 years in a row, and the students knew him because he had a minor hit, Cooler Than Me or something like that, and about 17 years ago. And then he came back the next year and he says, I've written this new song. And he played it. It was Took a Pill in Ibiza. And the students, reacted to it. But then by the next year, it had been a massive hit. And when he came back and played it, it was like, oh my God, the students are bowing down. So it's interesting. Dan Wilson's been a guest, Stephen Bishop. I mean, it's just, wonderful, wonderful folks coming in and playing the music of our lives. Just like you guys have done your whole lives. The connection is direct.
That's it. That's exactly it.
That's great. What do you think Brian's going to tour this year? I know he was just here playing in Long Beach. I wanted to go see it and I missed it.
He loves to tour. He loves to be with his musicians because they play his music so beautifully. They play it from the heart, play it with the feeling that he wants. The audience responds the way he would want them to. And he loves a good room service stick. So he loves to tour. For some reason on this last tour, he wasn't showing. And so I don't know if he'll go back out. He turns 81 this year.
Yeah.
And so maybe his road warrior days are indeed over. But I don't think he'll ever stop making music.
Yeah. I'm so thankful he's still around.
It's really a miracle.
It really is.
It's 40 odd years ago, if you'd said who's going to be the last Wilson brother, you could have gotten pretty long odds.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
David, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's just been wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Happy to be on anytime.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, David, so much.
Take care.
It.
Bye now.
What an interesting gentleman, and just really nice too. You could tell that he had a really good heart, and his intentions were all in the right place when it comes to Brian.
Yeah, now that he's really good friends with Brian, that's kind of interesting how you go from being a fan like that and then all of a sudden being like friends.
Yeah,
I want to go take his classes at UCLA, although
my God,
it'll cost a boatload. So I think I'm just going to go audit him and sit in the back.
Yeah, we could be a guest or something.
Or yeah, we could go. If we could learn to play piano, write hit songs real quick, we could be a guest.
Done.
Get on it.
Just give me a subject.
Get on it.
Okay. Get on it. Get on it.
There you go. Get down on it. All right.
Get down on it.
We're going to have to pay for the rights of that one line, so.
Never mind.
Thanks to our guest, David Leaf. Appreciate it. You can check out David's website. It's Leaf, Leaf, prod, Prod, like productions.com, leafprod.com.
And thank you to Elliot Kendall at Film and Music PR and Promotion for coordinating the interview.
Right on, Elliot.
David's book, God Only Knows, the story of Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys, and the California Myth is available at Amazon, or you can check out your local bookstore.
Also, check out our show notes on our website, rockandrollconfessional.rocks. There you can find links to some of the subjects talked about in today's show, including some great videos like the Brian Wilson Smile Live in London concert. We put that up there. And also the Beautiful Dreamer, Brian Wilson, and the Story of Smile documentary. Both those are up there, along with some other cool, exciting things that were talked about by David.
And how ironic that we were talking about David Crosby, too.
Yeah, and I put up something really very ironic up there. There was an outtake of David Crosby, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and the BeeGees doing the rehearsal for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And one of David's lines was, "Great to see you alive," when he ran into the BeeGees. So I thought that was really ironic that the day he passed away, I found that video. So that's up there if you want to see it.
You can please support the podcast by subscribing wherever you can and writing a review.
Follow and comment on Instagram and Facebook, and also share the posts with all of your friends. Call them, talk to them. That's it. Enjoy. Rock and roll. We got some more great shows coming up.
Yes, we do.
Want to say anything else, Reeds?
No.
Okay.
I'm freezing. We're
gonna go climb on our refrigerator and warm up.
No.
All right, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Stay warm. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
You're a bunch of wussies.
Big old pussies.